Being here, my friend.
Hey man, thanks for so much for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah, this is the first time we've had a conversation. First time we've met. I have definitely been following you for a while. I think some of the first YouTube videos that I caught from you were like comparing the no code platforms, like Adalo versus Bubble, Softer versus Adalo, and that's kind of how I started. That's like some of the first no code content that I really saw out there. Um, and yeah,
No,
I
thank you.
was
No, I'm excited, man. No, I'm
yeah.
glad that you found it. And yeah, that was I did about I can't remember close to 200 comparison videos. So glad that glad that you saw some of them.
Yeah, the I think the part of what I want to do today is definitely like first let's just go into the study a little bit. A lot of the things that I took away from the study are very descriptive, right? They describe how people are self-describing or what money they've earned using these tools. But there's a lot of interpretation to it as well. Like why do they think this? And you've given yours, and I'd love to just have a back and forth with you about like, why these some of these things might be true.
Yeah, love it, dude. Yeah, and there's a lot of conversations off the record that I have strong opinions about. And so yeah, this is gonna be awesome, man.
Yeah, I'm excited to get into that because yeah, the I think everyone kind of takes away will interpret the findings here a little bit differently. And even when I posted some of this stuff on Twitter, the reactions that people got, I was like, wow, I wasn't expecting that at all. Like I didn't even think that. So it's all pretty interesting, and not a lot of people I would say are even doing this. Like, how many research studies have you come across in the no code space?
Not many, to tell you the truth. That's why I wanted to try to do this as best that I could, and then teaming up with U Calgary to do it to really show as much as possible a non-bias like conclusion. I was super excited. So to answer your question, I couldn't really find out a lot of things. It was kind of just anecdotal or just not a very big sample size. So yeah, that's why I was like, let's try to make it as much as possible for the no code industry.
Literally, the only you and one other girl that was doing her PhD thesis in the no
Mm.
code industry, if you could call it that. Those are the only two like official studies that I've heard, and that's actually where I wanted to start. Right, like how did you like connect with the University of Calgary to do this, and like what was the motivation behind it? Like what did they want to see, or what did you want to see out of this?
Yeah. So okay, so it started a couple different ways. Basically, there is a professor there that has really been interested in the no code space. His name's Mohammed, and he is in charge of the business branch of U Calgary. So I can pull up his title, but basically he's in charge of that program, and he was trying to start a no code program in 2023. So we had talked previously throughout the year, and I just said, hey, you know what? I'm working on this study and would love to see if you're part of it, to contribute or to just answer the questions. And originally it was just he wanted to, give his take of what his experience was, but he's like, I think this would be really good if we could sponsor it and I could give my expertise. And I never turn down people that are experts. So I was like, okay,
Sure.
yeah, you want to do that? And so that's when he came in, and we can kind of talk about. I had a clear. I thought there were certain things right, but again, I don't have that background. I'm not a professor there or anything like that. And then after his findings and doing the analysis of it, I was like, yep, it was all exactly um, I would say a good 99.99% of my hunches were confirmed by this. And so, yeah, it just kind of worked out. And of course, that's what he does. That's his expertise. So it was kind of serendipity. Like I was just messaging him. We had interactions, before, and it was just good timing.
Right on. Yeah, so like you did the like he did the statistical side of things, I would imagine, right? Like analyze the data as
Mm-hmm.
you gave it to him.
Mm-hmm.
Got you.
Exactly.
All
Exactly.
right. Let's get into it because I'm definitely I'm excited to discuss like which of your findings, like you said most of them were confirmed, but Some of them seem obvious and some of them really don't. So I'm going to share my screen.
Yeah, let's do it.
And I'll just kind of toggle back and forth between some of the findings that I found interesting, and jump in where if there's any that really feel passionate about, because we'll just talk through that.
Yeah, let's do it.
So right off the bat, it seemed like the motivation was to see if people who use these tools are actually earning money, right? Like that seems to be where it came from. It kind of is the no codes marketing. Is it real? Can you actually make money off of this? So was that kind of a factor in like an underlying assumption of this study?
Yeah, well, there was a couple different things. I think I just wanted to really show the difference between like the signal and noise on Twitter, and people always saying like, I'm making this much money, here's this thread about it, blah 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 blah. And like, okay, let's see how true that is, but let's look at the tech stack to get you to point A to point B. And so it was really examining who's making money, what are the factors, is it just one stream of income, and then breaking down also a lot of, and I understand, I get it. A lot of marketing from a lot of no code platforms are like, oh, we're a one-stop shop, or you can create everything with it. And that's just not the case.
Yeah.
And so this was saying, okay, let's just go dive into the details. Let's see what people are using. Let's see how much they're making. And what we wanted to make sure was, let's be as honest as possible. Don't put your name on it if you don't want to. Don't contact it. Don't tell us who you are, and just be honest. Just be honest right now, so we can get as clear as possible what's really happening in the industry. So yeah.
Got you. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. One of the first things that we call out in the that you called out in the executive synopsis here is that those who sold courses, so like educational content as part of their revenue channel, were reported approximately 46K higher annual revenue levels on average at those that did not include this. So my interpretation of that is like people who are selling an educational component to whatever they're selling make more money, right? Is that kind of what you took away from that?
Oh, definitely. And and this was it, and this is really where we're having the balance of, we didn't want to give too much filler and have too much assumptions, and we just want that this executive synopsis. We wanted to just, this is what the data says, but there are also components with this. There's two ways of looking at this. There's some people like, oh, that means they're making tons of money just dog fooding. Like they're making money just talking about making money, and that's how they're making money.
Yeah,
that's possible. But also I want to tell people, and this is how I use it, and a lot of people anchor it. So if you're saying, hey, this is how much my services cost, if you can't afford it, you can just take my course and I'll show you step by step. It's just going to be async. You're not going to have access to me. You won't have the bat phone. And that's how they can downsell and make more money, versus just saying like, I've got a course to teach you how to launch a micro SaaS for $2,000 and you use Bubble. And then that's how they make all their money. And no one is making money on, no code SaaSes. If that makes sense.
I think there's also and part of this is like, is this just no coders selling to other no coders, right? Like that's a very real part of the ecosystem. I'll give you an example from my experience. Copilot, they build plugins primarily. I'm sure you've heard of them. And they normally it seems like a business strategy. Their documentation is very difficult to follow in and of itself. So you have to buy the course to kind of get the plugin to work the way that you want it to. And then if you want to take that to the next level, you book a coaching session with them, and that's like, time on their calendar. But there's a very clear sales funnel for this. Like, look, great plugin that does what you want, but you need to buy the course. And then you need to, and if you can't understand the course on your own, then you're going to that. So like, that's kind of an example of that I've seen, where it's like, all right, these people are definitely making money through this educational route.
Yeah. And I mean, that's the thing. I don't want to say it's a game, but what are you doing? How are you making money? Like, what's going on with that? And I think it's just important, and we'll definitely talk about the next point. Like, it depends on the type of business they want to do. Like, I mean, I'm honest. I tell people all the time. So many people come into like Bubble and they're like, "Oh, I'm just going to get a template using zero code." And I'm
No,
like, "Bro, why don't you just give me the money or light that on fire?" Because it's just not going to happen for you. Especially if you have like basis on Bubble and they're just like, "I'm just going to download this template from zero code." I'm like, it's done. So yeah, there is a strategy, but again, like you said, there's a kind of layers. I try to be honest with people. Like, what's the competency? What's the critical thinking? What level do you need to be at if you're going to be using these things? And I have no problem if they want to say that, and they're charging a certain amount. Um, that's their business. But yeah, there's a lot
certainly,
behind there.
certainly templates are, I think, geared towards those that are just approaching the platform for the first time in terms of like sales.
Yeah,
And anyone that, like, I tell this to everyone that starts on Bubble, don't start with a template. If you see a template you like use the coloring and the thematics of it, but rebuild that yourself, because you're never going to understand that logic completely. Someone else built that logic.
Yeah, and you're never going to you're never going to understand it, and it's not how you're going to maintain it at all. It's not going to happen. You've got to do
No.
your own thing.
And even if you
Absolutely.
did, you'd be like, you may, at the end of it, you're going to be like, well, I should have just built this myself, because it took me the same amount of time to understand that shit. So
Yeah.
like,
Yep.
like there's really no, I don't know. I'm so anti template, but I see that people, like newer people, doing that, and it's
It's
it,
tempting. It's
yeah, it
so
is
tempting.
tempting. Yeah. All right. Second point here is, among those who have sold, those who included automation services in their revenue channels reported approximately 24K higher annual revenue levels on average compared to those that did not include this in their revenue channel. So when we say automation services, what are you thinking there?
All right, so that really has to do with some kind of component where you're adding Zapier, Make, or something in their tech stack. And this is really, and we're gonna definitely for next year. We're gonna dig deeper a little bit. But if you're looking at this section, the people making the 24K higher and everything like that, they're after businesses that are just businesses that are making money and have nothing to do with the ecosystem of no code for the most part. They're rendering services to e-commerce businesses, to all different types of businesses. They're out of the ecosystem. Like I, I can't go with the exact number, but the far majority, they're not servicing other no coders. There's just businesses that are like, hey, listen, I don't want to pay another contractor or employee. How can you streamline my business? And that's what we're talking about, these automation services. It could be ones that, hey, I'm running e-commerce, I need automation that will update my QuickBooks, or my CRM or something like that. And they're just killing it. I will say, and I mean, if we want, I'll just small detour. Most automation specialists, experts are not as loud as no coders on Twitter, and they're making so much money, filthy money, and they're just quiet. They're just quiet assassins.
I
Usually the builders are the ones talking and they're making less money.
Yeah, I think that's very true, and I think it's because they're targeting people that actually have money too, right? Like they're
Yes.
targeting existing businesses who are willing to pay, because it actually provides value to their company to build that. So that's an interesting point. I know there's only one person that I can really point to that I know is doing a lot of automations, and she's active on Twitter, but not as loud. Olivia Look. I
Mm-hmm.
always follow her because she's always deep into very much Zapier, Make, I'm sure too. But yeah, she's definitely like that's her. It's not like we're building custom applications and entire. It's more like we're making existing business processes more efficient. And there's money there. Like there has to be money there.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, I'm sure we'll get into it. I think I have no problem when people are using no code to tinker or maker or doing your own side hustle, but like being the professional and being ones that just want to do your own thing, or like, hey, it's the same way I view like when people are using AI and using different things. If you want to do it for your own own side hobby and stuff like that, the problem is I find that a lot of no code platforms are not differentiating if they're right for tinkerers or makers or hobbyists, I would say, and then ones that are professionals and going there to either scale as an agency or do this and scale the business. I think there's, yeah, they don't have to be clear if they don't want to. I just find that it's a disservice when people are jumping into this world to then there's all these problems. But that's a side point.
I think it's it's like there's so many different paths to go down too. It's like you mentioned freelancing and agency. A big part of this study was people who are making money through freelance and agency work, right? Like not necessarily what you think as like monthly recurring revenue from a software solution, right? So making money with no code means a lot of different things, and people interpret that, I think, very differently. My path was the freelancer path, right? I started with the entrepreneurial next big idea. I fell into no codes marketing, like you'll have the next big tech startup and blah blah blah, and then I realized like, wait, there's so much more to it than just creating a platform, right? There's marketing, there's you need a team to really build out something that gets real traction. But yeah, the freelancer route is definitely one way to go. Only one though.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
All right. This one's pretty interesting. And I have a, pretty clear opinion about this, but I'd like to hear yours first. Those who indicated that their stack includes Softer.io were associated with 62% lower likelihood of having made a sale.
Okay. You want me to just go into it real quick?
Yeah.
All right. So first of all, I know Miriam. I work with Softer quite a bit. But let's just be honest with this. It has clear limitations. It's clear limitations. And I feel that a lot of people that jump on Softer, they're like, oh, I'm going to be doing X, Y, and Z. And then they jump in and they're like, whoa, I can only do X. Oh, all right. What the TLDR is, Softer is great for beginners. I feel like it's a great gateway drug. If you're like, you've built websites before, you understand WYSIWYGs, what you see is what you get. You have done things with Elementor, Wix, Squarespace, and you're like, I want to get into something a little bit deeper. This Softer is that gateway because it's very, very easy to get started. Mm-hmm. But to make money, to actually do these things, it's just a different ballgame. I mean, I have clients that they started in Softer, and I told them, I was like, yeah, you should have just built this in Bubble. And then we just had to go to Bubble, because I'm like, what you're asking for, the time and energy for you to Frankenstein the workarounds in Softer to get what you want, you might as well just either pay someone to redo it in Bubble and do it the right way, or learn and have that steep learning curve with Bubble and just get it done and learn how to do it yourself.
Now, do you think that's true of both internal and external solutions? Like, because I know Miriam has said before, like, we're really focusing on internal enterprise level software, which is not really what Bubble says they focus on. Maybe they are secretly, but they don't outwardly say that. So
yeah,
how do you think about that?
That's a great question. Yes and no. It depends on what you're trying to do. I know this sounds so generic, but like the functionality, could it work for internal tools? Yes. But what I find is a lot of enterprise or even small businesses that want to create internal tools, they are so meticulous by what the functionality they want because it's their business and they know like how they want the intricacies. Softer right now just isn't there to be able to do what they're asking for. Versus if you're looking at something like a Retool or Stacker, which is really meant for customization. But I will say this, Softer allows you not to break things. It's meant for you to have limitations for you not to break. I mean, I think if someone saw like you do something wrong, you see all the error codes that happen in Bubble, people just want to drink heavily versus it's not going to happen in Softer. Like you do some things and it's just not going to, it's going to tell you cannot do this and you can't break it the way you can do with other platforms. So I understand what she's saying. And depends on what internal tool, depends on the company, depends on but the reality is it's not made in the same way that what you can do with Bubble. And I feel like if I'm going to use an internal tool, and I mean, we can go into it, but I just retool. Stacker, yes, I understand. I think they have a better marketing team, and that's why Stacker gets a lot more love. But if we're talking about like pound for pound internal tools, Retool is pretty much killing everybody. And for developers that want to make something very quickly, on that side, on the low code side, Buddy Base is killing people. But
I
they
haven't
don't.
even heard of that one.
Yeah,
Buddy Base.
yeah, Buddy Base, they started trying to say they were for no coders, and I was like, you're being way too technical. You're actually for like coders. And I find when they went free and allowed you to make your own space and use GitHub integration, like developers love Buddy Base, but they talk to developers, but it's a low code platform.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I think I always try to think of all of these tools as kind of on a spectrum between ease of use, like the side with the guardrails, and customizability on the other, right? So Bubble doesn't give you that many guardrails. You can mess a lot of things up. Softer does, but they always seem to fall within one or the other. I think Retool might be an even better example of the other end of the spectrum. Retool is complicated. I've tried to use it. You need to know SQL queries to do that. So I don't know if I even really call it a no-code tool. It's probably low-code at the best. But very, very, very like you said, it's the most robust internal low-code tool that I can think of.
Yeah. Now I will give it one caveat. Now I will say this true. Yes, you do know SQL, but using ChatGPT, my brother-in-law, he doesn't know how, he's not good at SQL, but using ChatGPT and understanding the framework, it just wrote everything for him. And then he just copied and pasted and put in Retool. And now he has a micro SaaS for his own company.
Oh man, that ChatGPT is just a cheat code for everything in this space, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, but again, I tell people, I'm like, I try to do a caveat of like, listen, bro, if you don't understand the concept of queries or databases, like good luck, you ain't doing that. You can't tell it to do, you still need to understand what you're asking it, but you won't need to understand the queries. It will do everything for you. You just copy the code. But yeah, he did with that and app scripts, and you know, we can talk about, but he is a high-rise window cleaner, and they were using this old outdated software, using an emulator for Windows 95 for these window cleaners. It was so stupid, but he rebuilt it in Retool in a weekend, and that's all he does for his business.
And he had no tech background going into that. He just like picked up Retool and then used ChatGPT in conjunction with that and figured it out.
He's a wizard with Google Sheets. Like he just knows Google, but he knows how to do that. And then yeah, that was it. Chat and app scripts from Google Sheets, and that was it.
That's pretty impressive. Retool is not the easiest tool to start with, I would say. Like you said, it kind of depends how you come in.
That one, and I mean, I don't want to go too much. Have you played with Canonic at all?
No, haven't heard that.
Put it down. Those two, like, okay, exactly right here. I love how you were saying like the ease of use, Softer, Bubble, and then there's the fringe group, which is really low code, Node-RED, Canonic, and Retool. But those are all like, Node-RED are just such a cult following. Like if you ask, you have to be part of that cult, and they will just tear you a new one if you go in there and like, hey, I would love to learn how. Like they don't want to hear that. Like Node-RED community, like if you ain't with them, like they'll destroy you. But you know, Retool and Canonic, I feel like is probably, they just don't do the marketing right. But it's so powerful. It's so powerful. You can do so many things with it. And Flutterflow, but you know, I'm putting those off on the side.
I want to come back to Flutterflow in a little bit. Let's talk about this first graphic here, where the most popular label that people identified with was entrepreneur. I think my biggest question around this is like, are you an entrepreneur? Because I'm pretty sure that I responded as entrepreneur.
Yeah.
But I think of it as entrepreneurship in like, I'm working for myself in building apps for clients. So I'm technically a business owner, but I imagine other people might have answered this completely different with the same answer. They're an entrepreneur and that they're building a business using a low code platform. Any distinction between those?
Not really. The reason, I'll tell you the reasoning why we phrased it this way. Um, there is a lot of pushback that I heard from different low code platforms. Okay, I think that a lot of no code platforms and in no code marketing, they get this incredibly wrong with who their target avatar is and how they describe themselves. And this was the question to allow them. This is great market research for them because I think they need to get better at this. I think they're going after or talking to the person in a wrong way. I think that they are overly trying to fit people to call themselves no coders when a lot of these people view themselves as an entrepreneur, and I don't see that in their copy. And so this was purely to see whatever the rationale, how do they describe themselves, what they do, because I don't see a lot of no code platforms making an emphasis or even saying that this is for entrepreneurs and explaining how someone with an entrepreneur mindset or them identifying how they're utilizing no code tools versus them necessarily needing to be called no coders.
I have so much to say about this. Mr. Hackathon, thanks for joining. I'm glad you're enjoying the conversation. The entrepreneur, right? So the marketing is a point of frustration for me since I've been, and I found Bubble in roughly 2017. I was pretty early to the platform. And I expanded the stack that I use. I use a few different tools, but I think the biggest thing that bothers me about the marketing, and Flutterflow does this too, is like you're trying to sell like that these people are going to be the next like startup. You're going to have the next startup idea, the next unicorn startup idea, which is so difficult. It's like writing a hit song. It's not, and it is, I think, a more practical thing to sell people. And again, I understand this is a marketing technique. So, but I think the people that, to your point, like they should be speaking to are entrepreneurs in the way of like you're already a business owner in a sense, right? You're not dependent on a platform to build your business. You're already a business owner, and you're like using a custom software solution to either enhance the offering that you're already putting out there, or some internal tool that makes your business more efficient. I feel like that because a lot of I don't want to go off a tangent, but there's so many businesses that I speak to that are completely unaware that they can build software for themselves, and there's just no awareness of it, and that's the type of people that I want to be speaking to that already have that business, and they just don't even know that custom software is an option for them. That's my feeling. That's my frustration with it.
Oh, absolutely. I feel you, man. I feel you. And hopefully it will get better over time. I mean, this is the whole thing. I mean, there are so many businesses I talk to. It might seem like such a basic thing, but when you're in e-commerce or what kind of business, there's even a difference of a lot of people don't even know the term of automation or they don't use it. They're just like, I'm doing things manually. I'm trying to do things not manually. There's even like a language barrier to even express what they're having trouble with that I find that are my best clients. They know that they're doing things, they're working harder, but they don't think about automation processes, integrations, APIs, open APIs. They're just like, I'm stuck doing boring things, doing it manually.
Yeah.
How can I do, you know what I'm saying? So it's the level of education, understanding, and then giving them a vocabulary. We're not even there. You know what I'm saying? It's almost like jumping ahead of all of these people. Again, it depends on what these companies want to do. I mean, I understand Zapier's done a great job recently trying to, reframe it or have a marketing ploy of different people, but there's a lot of language and there's a lot of people that could be using this, and I just don't think they're speaking to them.
I think this graphic speaks directly to that, where the industries that no coders work in. Now, this may be something that they perceive that they're working in a tech industry, right?
Yeah.
But really, where these tools can be leveraged the most, and I think will have the most impact, are all of these other ones, right? Nonprofit, government, education, all of where there isn't like a heavy, you wouldn't really think of like a lot of tech talent being in those areas, right? Like, doesn't that make more sense to leverage these tools in those spaces. And again, I just don't think that's happening yet.
Yeah. And it's funny. I saw that you put it up and on Twitter, and I was going back and forth to explain a little bit more because it's, again, and we'll do it better next year. And that's why I was saying in the tweet, like, to identify, but we didn't want to have a lot of follow-up questions for self-identification, because then we were bouncing how many questions were too much when people were answering this. But that's exactly right. I think a lot of people, if they're identified that they're in the tech industry, serving tech, I find that there's a lot of self-limiting beliefs why they can't go in others. I saw a lot of people like, oh, well, nonprofits won't use this. Government can't use this for security reasons. I'm like, okay, so let's just talk about, but that, again, I think that's the limiting, that people don't understand, like, what backends you could use, what does this mean, all of these things. And I think they're defaulting. They're like, I have to be in tech to do these things. Versus, again, I think that's where the automation people are crushing it. Automation's not saying the same words or vocabulary that people that are trying to just go after tech is going after. And I think that's where they're winning. I think automation is just like, hey, doesn't what you're doing suck? Like, I can just make that go away. And they're making it a lot simpler versus ones that are not there. I just think they're just using too many things. And I will just say one thing and I'll stop. When I hear a lot of people's pitches, when they're not doing automation, they're in the weeds. They're using so many big words to describe, and they're like, I don't know why this nonprofit didn't hire me, or why this didn't work. I'm like, well, they just don't understand you, man. Like, they just don't understand anything that you're saying. Versus automation is just like, you're here, and how much time are you spending on that? How much are you worth? Okay, let me just alleviate that. And you don't have to get another person that you have to pay. They're like, sold, because you're answering their problem versus trying to be really technical. That's anecdotal, but like, that's what I see a lot.
Yeah. And that is, well, it is anecdotal, I guess, but it's also like you're speaking to like when we tend, like, when I say we, I mean us as like no code people, right? People who are enthusiastic about no code. A lot of the time, and I've fallen into this too, we fall into the trap of putting out content and resources for other no coders, as opposed to just speaking to a problem that someone may find in the nonprofit world, in the financial world, right? Like, they don't care about what API does what. They just want their problem solved, and the extent to which you can speak to that. And I think that's also, something I want to get into a little later too, is like how to go about finding an audience like that when, I have a skill set here, but I don't know how to speak to the problems, to the people that I actually want to target with the skill set that I have, right? I've been talking to other no coders for the last 6 months, and I don't know how to get out of that habit. So part of this we'll get into that too. But yeah, I mean, a little more on the self-identifying here. This is an area that's always pretty interesting to me, because there are no standards by which you truly define a no-code expert or a Bubble expert, right?
Yeah.
Like, Bubble is notoriously non-committal about like putting a certification out there. So where do you think, like, if you were to break this down here?
I love this question.
Yeah, like how do people decide whether or not they're a beginner, intermediate, or expert in this space?
Okay. Yeah. This is really, really good. Okay. So I'm just going to put it this way. It's fighting against ones that are self-identifying as a certain way and they feel like they're better than they are. And then like them being honest. And the in between that we had, I'll get the exact like vocabulary, but what we said was intermediate. If you're not dealing with databases or understanding that, then you shouldn't self-identify yourself as intermediate or expert, right? Now, the reason that we put it in the middle was what we kind of like what you were saying, ease of use. Most people that are using Softer, Adalo, those kind of things, very easy ones, but are limiting, they don't understand the concepts of databases and really don't do anything with APIs. And we find on that level, that limits you a great degree on the no-code scale if you don't understand databases or understand even how to use APIs or anything like that. So that's how we made it like a level of how did we scale it, right? The ones where it's expert, and we're gonna kind of tweak it maybe for next year, but can you do what you're asking, or can you use APIs by yourself and don't need help? That's kind of where we put the scale. Now, the thing is, if some people want to go a little bit deeper and be like, but technically, if you want to do certain things in no code, you don't always need to use APIs. Yeah, but if you're going to be doing, if you're going to be using this to a very good degree, I still think that you're going to have to know databases and APIs in that thing. So the middle ground was, are you competent with APIs? Do you know how to use databases? And that was the spectrum from beginner, intermediate, advanced.
I think that's fair enough. I still I have I think part of this too. Like, yes, you're absolutely right in that there are people who probably are more confident than they should be. I think the deeper I go in any one of these directions, I just feel like I know less, right? And I work in Xano pretty extensively, so I understand how to structure a database. I work with APIs, like I know all of that. But at the end of the day, all of these fields are so infinitely deep that it's so hard to like call, yeah, I'm a Xano or I'm a, what do you call it, expert in any area here. And maybe that's just insecurity on my part because I don't have a tech background. But it's kind of like I know how much I don't know, and that like gives me pause to like throw up expert onto my Twitter profile. Even though I probably know more than most people do. That's me.
I love that. First of all, I like hearing that. I think you might be in the minority because I usually see people overcompensate or say that they're an expert, and it's like, no. I can't tell you how many times people are like, well, I'm a bubble expert. And I'm like, okay, so tell me about X, Y, and Z. And they're like, and they just like freeze. Like, you know what I'm saying? So I appreciate what you're saying. And that's why we kind of made these caveats. What we're really trying to focus on is there is a lot of people. How can I put in this nicely? I'm not going to be very nice. It's just, if people don't even understand the structure of how relations work in databases, unless you're a designer, unless you're in Figma and Webflow, you ain't doing a lot. Mm-hmm. You ain't doing a lot. I can't, you know what I'm saying? If you're in, this was a whole discussion of like, if we're going to, because I don't think this was, we had people fill out and use Webflow. I feel like they're their own section. I feel like Webflow needs to have their own section in this or its own study, because I just think that's a totally different thing. I think it's closer to web developers, designers use Figma and Webflow, and they should be bunched. Yes, technically it crosses over and some no coders use them, but like it's just a different spectrum. It's a different part.
They almost strike me as the more artistic side of what we do, right? They almost seem to me like artists. Yeah.
Exactly. And we added them late because some people are like, but I want that in my tech stack. I was like, okay. but I kept them off originally for a reason. But I definitely agree with you.
This is one that really shocked me, and I think I fundamentally disagree with the majority of people who answered this way. The most common problem using no code is not enough features. That is
okay. We're going to talk about this. Yeah,
Let's talk about this.
Let's go.
Because I like even if you're thinking of them as features, I think that even that is fundamentally wrong. Like, it's your job as the developer to find the way to do it. It's possible, 100%. There is a way, whether it's custom code, whether it's another tool, whether it's a make integration, whatever it is, there's a way. There's a solution to whatever problem you're having. So to put that back onto the platform, that's like saying, to me, it's like, oh, JavaScript is too difficult to learn, so JavaScript sucks. Like I have to disagree with the majority here, opinion here.
Yeah, and I don't. There is something that was missing that I wanted another section. I just don't. We'll definitely do it for the next year. I wanted the correlation of how many people that have never made a sale, how many people correlating with not enough features, and have that, because I think there's tons of people. I'm not sure. Are you familiar with AppSumo? Those
AppSumo,
people?
no.
Okay, so it's the AppSumo. So Noah Kagan runs it. AppSumo is like it's discounted software. I mean, Zapier ended up on it when it first started. Like some of the big no code platforms back in the day, like started on AppSumo. It's been around. I think it's 10 plus years at this point. Maybe close to like 12 or 13. But the point is, a lot of times when you buy, there's a reason why I'm saying this story. Because it was so cheap to buy it, people are constantly like, you need to put this feature in, or I want this, and it's this price. But I'm like, how many people are using all this stuff? Like, you're buying all this for cheap. You guys ain't even making money with this. Like, what are you asking for? And I feel like it's the same way when people are like, oh, well, the reason I didn't make this money is because I don't have enough features. I'm like, no, that's because your idea wasn't good, or you
Right.
didn't know how to sell. And the correlation, will definitely do it next year. I can almost guarantee, but I want, again, we have to do the data and correlate, but the ones not enough features, that is severely ballooned for people that have never made a sale.
Wow. And that kind of speaks to the majority. Well, it speaks to about half of them because, right, I think you called out up here, nearly half of those polled have not made a sale.
Yeah.
Right. So roughly, if that is the case, then yeah, like it's explained by you're looking at the platform as a limitation, and there is and what gives me hope about this, Doc, is like I did one quick follow up to some of the questions that you had, and what was the reason that half of no code builders have yet to make a sale. These two were the clear leaders here, right? Lack of marketing, lack of product validation, which is exactly what you just said. So people are aware of this. They're aware that it's on them to define what their fit is, and it's not just on the tool to build a platform for you that's going to make you money. Like there's so much more than just building something to reaching an audience and making money from them, right? Like
Yeah. And I think it's I think it's a knee jerk thing. I don't, you know what I'm saying? Like when it was there, I think a lot of people are like, well, this is the reason why I'm not succeeding. It's just not what I'm looking for. I need more. But once you get back to it, and I always tell all the students, like, but did you validate it? Does anyone want what you're at? Like, does anyone want it? Does anyone want it? And I find that sometimes if it's an idea that someone's had for many years, they view it as part of them, and rejection is hard. Rejection is really hard. So if it's their passion project, and some people either don't know how to market, that's one way. But I find that a lot of people are afraid that people reject the idea, which feels like they're rejecting them. And then it's a spiral effects. So then they don't want to market it. They're shy about it. Oh, it's not finished. Oh, the reason I can't bring it to market is I don't have enough features, blah, 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 blah. And it's really, it's just not very good. It's not very good.
Yeah, the idea itself doesn't really solve a problem that people care that much about. So much to a point where they're willing to give you money for it. And that is a hard pill to swallow, especially if you've spent the last 6 months building this in a silo, right?
I'm going to give you two examples. The two examples that I see over the time, people trying to create a streaming service and people trying to create a marketplace. All the time, they think this is like gold, the marketplace, if only they were positioned right. And marketplaces are so hard to do. They are notoriously hard to find product market fit, to find, or you should really go after one side instead of both sides of the market. There's just so many nuances, and tons of people are like, oh, you know what, Software, it was too easy. I need something like ShareTribe. Oh, I need ShareTribe Flex. I'm like, you don't have 5 people that want this. You don't have 5 people right now that would pay you a dime. It's not, you don't need ShareTribe Flex. You need to just go back. And I always say, like, not everything has to make you money. Maybe if this just makes you feel good and this is just something you want to use with your friends, like, feel good with that. Just don't feel like it has to be the next thing on the market. That's all.
Yeah, a big part of it, I think, whether or not people stick with their ideas, the expectations that they go in with, when they're not seeing the progress that they thought they were going to see and the time frame that they thought they were going to see, they tend to say they'll say either, well, if they're honest with themselves, they'll probably think like, oh, maybe I didn't do enough on the front end of validating this idea before I built it, uh, or if they're not self-reflective, they may just say, "Oh, the tool, I didn't have the right tools, right? Like the
Yeah.
tools were the problem."
Yeah.
You know. And on that same point, what are the most used tools in this space? I was actually really surprised by this. Airtable and Notion being the top tools used. And I have to think that if people are using, tell me if I'm wrong here, but I think if people are using Airtable, they're mostly using that as kind of an internal solution. It's mostly data storage and managing data. So it's
Yep.
not this entrepreneurial. Well, it's not. Let me say that again. It's not this big. It's a more practical use than like finding the next unicorn startup, right? Am I thinking about that in the right way?
Absolutely. That's I mean, that's what we hear, and that's what people are saying. It's yeah, it's internal use. It's yeah, it's just storing data in a structured way. That's it. That's
All
it.
of these the top three, I think, are mostly doing that. Notion, Zapier. But this is where we start to get into more like, all right, this is a people are building MVPs, or Webflow. Obviously, they're building websites. Software might be an internal tool. But the top three, the data kind of speaks for itself here, are automation based.
Yeah.
They're not these big marketplaces or brand new ideas that need to be tested. I'm actually surprised that Make is lower than uh,
Yeah.
Zapier in this case. Well, what do you see as the big differentiator between these two tools? Like,
Yeah, it's a great question. Um, I just think Zapier has a better marketing. I think they're just better at telling people. Make between them rebranding from Integromat to Make, and them really. I mean, I talked to. I don't know if I was at a like fireside chat or we were talking. Basically, back in the day, Zapier did something really really good for their SEO and like everything. They used to make individual pages of all of their like combinations to start ranking, and I thought
mhm.
that was really interesting. And that's how like I feel like they just have the market cornered on automation. When people think about how to get started, Zapier is in their head. Make, I don't feel like they have the right branding. It's kind of ambiguous. Like they don't have that same kind of. I feel like Zapier has the same kind of like connotation as like MailChimp does with CRMs and email marketing. You know their brand. It's really, really slick and just feels good. Make, I feel, is more powerful, cheaper, and better, but they just don't have that dominance. And that's why they're lagging behind.
I think the positioning definitely. I like I said, I think Make. I've used both, and I feel like Make is a more robust tool. If they don't have a what do they call it? A module for what you need, you could still probably build it through API work, which I don't know if you can really do that with Zapier. Maybe you can.
They can, but it's harder. And I was going to say, oh, speaking of which, I feel like Zapier is easier to understand visually, and for people that don't like type in what you need help with, then it makes the links, and then it's. I feel like again, it's just the onboarding in the UI UX is just so much easier for people that are not used to automation to understand. I feel like Make is more intimidating and you have to understand what you're going to be doing. I feel like the nodes, like for people that understand what they want to do, it's like, oh my, this is my place. This is all I need. But
Right.
I feel like it's too open-ended. I you know what? I think it's similar to like a lot of times I have people like pull up Bubble for the first time and it's so open and they're just like, well, where do I begin? Like it's just so overwhelming. I feel like Make has the same problem.
Yeah, absolutely. And to your point around ambiguity, I think is the way to pronounce it. I always mess that
Let's
up.
do it. Yeah, it sounds good.
The Make is like the change from Integromat was such a unique name that if you Googled anything and then put Integromat at the end of it, you're going to a page that you want. Whereas if you Google anything and then put make at the end, you'll get like a cooking recipe
I
sometimes.
don't even know how they got that domain name, and I don't understand it. I never understand. I understand what they're going for, but that opened up. I feel like it was a miscalculation. I really do. I understand like make feels better and maybe no, it was bad. It was just bad. It's bad. And I can't tell you how many times people will just be like, they'll say it and then they'll do it Integromat. Like people still use Integromat because people still call it that. Like it's terrible.
Right here is a perfect example of that, right? You can't just say make. It's too vague in like everyday speech to make that like to make that like make is in so many different like sentences that we use. Yeah, I was disappointed with that with the change. But what are you gonna do? They haven't changed it back, which I'm surprised. I thought they would have gotten some kind of backlash about it.
Yeah. I mean, I'll just, the only one that's worse than that, I mean, they know, I talk about them all the time. The.com. The worst combination. I could go on. I could do a TED talk on how many missteps The.com has done, but the name is trash and it does no service to them. It makes no sense. It makes no sense. And make is in the same category. Not as bad as The.com, but it's not helping anybody. It's not helping anyone.
Let's get into the last chapter here on sales. Again, this is probably the most interesting to people that are getting into no code and low code and are just finding out about it. Like, how do you actually make money with these tools? This graphic here really breaks down how people are making money using them. Building apps for clients clearly being the dominant percentage of how people earn money. It's certainly mine, right? Like the work that I do is the project that I'm mostly working on right now is an internal tool for a real estate company, right? That would otherwise not have any, I mean, I'm sure you can hire a developer to build something, but it's kind of an ongoing, I have to really deeply understand the business as well as deeply understand the technical side of what I'm building for them. And that's very difficult to do. So, like this is how I make money now. And, to your point around the automation services, like these are the top two. They're not SaaSes. They're not the top one is, they're not, how do I say it? It's a smaller percentage that are making money from like monthly recurring revenue and a subscription model. Was that a surprise to you when you found that in the study, or were you pretty like, was that one of your assumptions?
That was a pretty strong assumption. The top two, I was pretty, that didn't surprise me at all because I think, and there's like, I mean, we'll go into, I mean, building apps, it's not surprising because all of these top platforms, Bubble, Flutterflow, Softer, they have all these expert services or places where it's essentially a marketplace for ones to build apps. There's tons of people that get inspired, they create accounts, and then 20 hours in, they're like, yeah, not for me. I need to go get someone. So it makes sense that because they're at top of funnel, they're right there. They're right there. I think micro SaaS, and we got to do a better job of talking to ones. There's a whole other thing. The thing why I think micro SaaS is a smaller amount, I think it's larger, but they're not no coders, or they're not ones using no code tools to create micro SaaS that are sitting on top of some of these platforms that they're killing it, such as Airtable. I can't tell you how many people are making serious money, but technically it's coding. And so I had people reach out and they're like, I don't think I would contribute to this because technically I'm coding it. It's for these ones that are technically no coding platforms, but I'm coding it. So there's a whole other sub genre of people that are killing it and making tens of thousands of dollars per month, but they're coding at this point. So yes, simple answer. Yes. That's what I thought.
And that further breaks it down here. types of businesses run by no coders, the majority freelance. About half that is an agency. So these two really go hand in hand, right? You're still essentially building something for a client, regardless of whether that's an internal tool or something that's public facing.
Yeah,
I think these two, there's a lot of similarities in these, user
absolutely.
types, I guess you can call them, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say the only thing is with some that I again we'll debate if we'll do it for next year, but there are quite a few. I mean, just talking to people, the agencies that are doing automation, they're the best ones that scale that aren't like also like burning out, right? Because there's a lot of times there's a lot of agencies that are building apps for people, but what we find is there's a cap or they're also looking to diversify because they don't have enough developers at a certain skill level. They can only take on so many clients, et cetera, versus automation agencies. Their business is automation. So they scale their agency to have more capacity. And so they're making more money pound for pound than agencies that are just doing apps.
Yeah, yeah. That's a very it's something that I've discussed. And I like it's kind of a hard transition to make. I think I just because like the how do you say the traditional agency client agency model is just like I give you specs, you build me software, and then I pay you, right? So like breaking out of that, I feel like I'm starting to get to that point where I'm thinking about that, but it's still there's still so many like assumptions that I have in my head that I have yet to break. Like, what would you say to someone that's like flirting with the automation route and kind of selling their services to established businesses to make their like how would you start that? How do you approach that? Because it just seems so inaccessible to someone like myself who's been doing it one way.
Yeah. I would say, first of all, and this sounds so basic, and it just depends on your goals, how much you're trying to make, and reverse engineer that first. Because I find that a lot of people are thinking like, oh, I approach it this way, I'm making X, Y, and Z. I'll never make this much. I'll never do. It's like, no, no, no. Let's just talk about it first. How much do you want to make, and what kind of businesses do you want to go after? Because if you go after automation for ones that are doing e-commerce, and I would say for instance, I want to streamline it, going after small to mid-size Shopify businesses, and I'm going to be offering automation services. I look at it two different things. You could look at a base rate plus how much sales you're making or how much time and energy you're saving them, right? I usually go after some kind of revenue source. So now they can clearly see how much I'm worth. So then I'm saying, hey, I'm going to charge X amount as a retainer per month. This is going to be a contract for the next 6 to 12 months. And we're going to be looking at how much money I made based off of my automation services every quarter. And I'm going to
Mm,
get 5%, 8%, 10% off of the automation. How do you feel about that?
got you.
And that's pretty much it, because and then I'll find the retainer. And a lot of times people are like, oh, that retainer is too much. Oh, no worries, no worries. We can drop it. I'll just take a bigger percent. Is that cool? That
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. Because I'm like, hey, if you don't think I'm worth it, great. But if we lock in, we're reevaluating it every 12 months because I'm going to make you so much money that now it looks stupid. When we revisit this in 12 months, you'll be begging to go back the other way. And probably at
Yeah.
that point, I'm like, probably not. Probably not. We're going to lock in.
That is that's good. That is good insight right there. And I think something that you said that I want to just make sure that I understood correctly is like being very narrow about who you're focusing on too, right? Like you said, I think it was B2B marketplaces. Or no,
Yeah, well, you could do B2B, or I would just go after only e-commerce that have a Shopify store. So I would
that
go only for a very specific tech stack.
that's very narrow. And it doesn't have to be that. It doesn't like I think it could just be even like say I had some kind of intimate knowledge about the nonprofit space.
Oh yeah.
Like wouldn't you think of like all right, these are all the inefficiencies that a nonprofit company has, I guess there's variability in that too. But like you said something so specific or it was like e-commerce with the Shopify storefront. Like that's like really pinpoint. And then I imagine that becomes this is part of the other thing that I wanted to talk to you about. It becomes a lot easier to create content for that group of people, like where you're just speaking to them. Like there's no one, there's no,
Yeah.
instead of trying to speak to everybody and like, hey, I build apps, right? Like that's
Yeah.
what we get stuck doing.
Oh yeah, definitely. And so like if you're looking at even like the no code space for me, before I just talk about everything with no code, but for the most part now my niche is more how you can get paid, how your operations, right? So I've really niched down to just operations and what goes on there, what's the structure, and really I had at the beginning on YouTube, it's more like idea to online business. For my clients, it's ones that have a revenue at 1 mil starting. And then we're getting you to the point of you deciding to automate it to be a lifestyle business, or we're building it for you to sell. So you having all your operating system in place, your SOPs in place for you to have suitors to buy your business. Which one do you want? But that's the window. You have to have a profitable business, and then I'm going to take you to have it automated where you have an operator in place and you can be on the beach 32 weeks out of the year, or in 36 months you can walk away from it and you have all the profit that you want.
Wow. Now I imagine that you hacked at that a while before finding, because that's a hyper specific niche, right? Like, how did you get to that point where you're like, this is my target? That just seems
Yeah.
so difficult to figure out.
Yeah, it took years. Like it took years of just opening the floodgates and then deciding who do I like working with, and then what do I find joy in, and then just working that way. So like originally I was more doing all of the same thing I do now, but only for fitness influencers. And then I found out they have no money. So then we had to like scale it. Then it was, I'm already in fitness. I love fitness. Let's do it for CrossFit gyms. Let's do it for parkour gyms, right? Then the margins didn't make sense. Then I was like, okay, it's not brick and mortar. I still want to stay in fitness, but I want to do e-commerce, right? So it was just trial and error and trying to find it out. And then the way that it fell into it, I did a lot of work in people that worked with Vayner Media and VaynerX. And then I started working with some of their clients and people that did 4Ds and things like that. And that did not end up being clients for VaynerX and Sasha Group, but they still had a lot of revenue, but they weren't at the level of a Fortune 500 or something like that. And then from there, seeing they didn't care about necessarily apps or anything like that. They were just in their business. What were they having trouble? They couldn't see the forest through the trees. Then it became like, let me just work on your operations. Let's just talk about strategy. And then it became, okay, what do you want? The end goal. Okay, we've gotten you to this point. You feel less stress. And basically, a lot of people, some people didn't want to sell. Like a lot of people are like, oh, I want to be acquired. But there's tons of people that just want an easier business and just want an operator. And I was like, let's just make it a lifestyle business. Or I love SOPs. I love operations. Let me build out your standard operating procedures so you can sell it like a franchise and people can just buy into it and you can walk away.
Can you tell me what you mean when you say operator?
Yeah. So an operator, I define it as someone that's going to do the day-to-day, or can be a GM, or just the everyday person. So depending on how big the business is, it can be the GM that runs a team underneath, or it might just be someone that's the operator that is working with a small team, but they're in charge of the day-to-day. The only thing that they don't have, they're not going to be doing is probably like investor calls or looking at quarterly reports and deciding how are we going to spend the money this year or quarter. But other than the revenue and like how to do that, they're doing everything else in the business.
Got
We're
you.
managing
Okay.
that.
So prior to the operator, the owner, the client that you're working with would have been filling all those roles, sucking up a lot of their time, so that they're not focusing on this more important stuff of like investors and whatever else the business needs.
Yeah, and I would say it's a lot of times you get this. I mean, just tons of businesses, tons of owners are like, no one can do it as good as me. That's a ton, that's the biggest problem. So they become the bottleneck. So it's removing them and teaching them how to manage up and manage down, like how to basically structure that team. And so it's eliminating them and just feel like, we're not wishing bad things, but if you're in a coma for 6 months, what's going to happen to this business? Or, some people, the nicer version is like, what if you want to take a 6-month vacation? But to usually shock the client, it's usually like, what if you almost die and you have a stroke and no one can run it? What are you going to do? Like, we're going to go for worst case scenario to rebuild everything that you don't need to be there at all. Like, I joke, my wife always like, so I went in for LASIK like in May, and she's like, the YouTube channel. I was like, no, I have all the SOPs. I was like, you can run my channel. Like, people would, they would know it's a different person, but like nothing changes if I don't have my eyes. Nothing changes. And that's what I build all the businesses for them to be that bulletproof.
That's a pretty unique value proposition that you're selling. You're basically selling them that dream of like, look, you can do this business and live on the beach, right? Like at the same time. It's not like you have to retire to get there. I can do this for you. That's beautiful. Yeah. That's like, wow.
Yeah.
Show me the way, Doc.
Yeah, but it just took time. But you know what I'm saying? Like, because some people are like, oh man, I can't believe you fell into. I'm like, yeah, but I've been doing this for 10 years. like, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's been a lot of things. And of course you can do it quicker. But the problem was I was always looking at what other people were doing. I'm like, that's how I'm going to model mine after this. And I was always frustrated. I'm like, my business, like, why am I not getting the revenue? Or why is it not like performing? Or why am I not doing the stories, what I see? And it's just like, those are great aspirations, but like, you've got to find your own unique value prop, who you are, what makes you so different, and like triple down on that. And don't worry about all these other things. Easier said than done, but that's how
10 years seems to be the magic number. From what I hear, like from what you just said, other people that have actually got traction off of an idea that they have, it seems to be 10 years is like the number. And that's a long time. That is a long-term commitment in yourself to just like fuck up a lot. Like you're just fucking up constantly and trialing and error and like getting discouraged and stuff. I don't think everybody can do that. But it's like, if you can get through to that other side, you're in a position like you are now where it's like, I know exactly what I do. I know exactly what I can do. And it's so narrow and laser focused that it's like, I just, I admire it because I haven't found that thing yet. But I'm not that far in. I've been working for myself for the last 3 years, a little over 3 years. So I still feel very much like a novice to all of this. Hopefully in speaking with people like you, I hope other people gain that same inspiration as I am. It's like, if you just keep going and you just pay attention to the cues that people tell you, they will tell you what they want. You just got to be listening to that.
Yeah. And I'll tell you what, I didn't listen to it for a long time. Like when I had clients at I've been working with clients for years in consulting, for a while, I would just send them videos like this, what I think you need to do. And after a while, like people would be like, hey Doc, like, because I would always do like monthly check-ins, and people would be like, hey Doc, like, that's great, but like, just send the video. We don't need to meet. And I was like, oh, you know what? Oh, I don't really all right, whatever. I'll send the video. Not until it was, I met Max at 100 Days of No Code, and there was this guy named Edmund. We were in it. And I never thought I had a personality for YouTube. I would always either do things without my face, or I would ghostwrite and do things for clients. I just never thought it was like something I could do. And so I had I've in my YouTube account, I think I have at this point, probably over 1,300 videos, but most of them are unlisted because I just would send them to clients. And Edmund was like, hey, like, Doc, what you're doing, I think you should just like make them public on YouTube. And this was like beginning of the pandemic. I was like, I don't think like people want it. And like, that's when I started doing public videos. But I'd always had that skill set. I was like, no one values that. And then that was the differentiation of like how everything took off.
Wow. And that was somebody suggesting it to you too. Like not even, wow. Yeah. So and it is possible to be ignoring those cues for quite a while. And then once you switch that on, it's like there's an immediate change to like, the better. And you're like, wow, I've been doing, like, I've had it right here this whole time. And I've totally been looking the other way.
Oh, absolutely. And I was thinking about YouTube in like into 2014, 2015. God, I wish I started that. But the thing was, I had this consultant. He was a pretty big YouTuber. Like he popped off a lot now. Um, and he's used by YouTube. And I was like, yeah, I'm gonna do a couple different platforms. And he's like, if you're not committed to YouTube, like, do not start. Get off. And I was like, all right. And I just didn't start. And I understand what he was saying. In retrospect, I wish he said it in a different way,
Mm.
or he understood how to communicate with people better. But I understand what he was saying, but I could have accelerated this so much if I started then and understanding what I needed to do. So that again, it goes back to like cues and understanding what people are saying. But I would say if there's something that you can just do, you would do it for free, and you're so rapid fire and can do it. I'm like, you're going to make money right away, but keep working at it. Keep working on how you can scale that ability, because my ability is just videos. Like I have severe dyslexia. I have a very hard time reading. And so videos, that's why I can do stuff with outlines, because I can't read manuscripts. I can't do it very well, but I can, like, if you tell me like, these are the three things, I can talk for an hour. It doesn't really matter.
Why do you
So,
think? Why do you think
those are,
that he said that? In that way, was he trying to say like, if
yeah.
you're not 100% invested in creating YouTube content, you're not going to make it on YouTube? Like, was that the intention behind it?
I think that's what it was, because I was saying, I was telling him like, hey, I'm thinking about like these three platforms, and I was thinking about being omnipresent and do this, and I think he was explaining like the amount of devotion that you need, and I understand that, but also everyone needs baby steps to get them to learn a habit and to figure out what they need to do. And that, we can go into content creation, but I always tell people there's a very specific strategy I tell people if they want to do YouTube. But I'm like, it just reps. It's like going to the gym. It takes time. And it's just like, they say ones that need to start, working out, don't go and start going 5 days a week. Just get a membership, then go in the next day, then sit on the bike. Like, don't even pedal, just go home afterwards. Like, there are tons of small steps that you can take with YouTube. And I think because I was talking to a YouTube expert and he felt like, yes, you do have to work hard at it to a certain level. I just think he was just like, maybe he was just like jaded. He was just like, either you're going to do it or like, don't waste your time.
Hmm.
And I understand, but it's it's kind of harsh, and it doesn't really, I wouldn't encourage that sentiment, if that makes sense.
I don't know if that's the thing to say to someone who's trying to figure out like whether or not they should do this. It has to be my life, or I'm not going to do it at all.
Yeah.
Like, why would anybody do any?
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to be married to
Yeah.
YouTube for the rest of my life.
That's
right?
what,
Like,
and that's what I was saying. I was like, and I was paying for consulting, and I was like, I understand. I was like, first of all, like, and I didn't question it. I was just like, listen, I'm like, and I'm not looking for someone to kiss up to me, but like when you pay for a consulting session, I don't think that should be the best tactic for someone to do it. I think you need to show people like there's a way, and you've got to have accountability, and there's small like steps to take. And if you do those steps and you don't emotionally feel it, or you don't see the results, reevaluate how you want to pivot. I think that's a better way versus like, yeah, you've got to spend 3 years on YouTube, do this every single day of your life, look at your analytics, look at these things. And if you ain't there, like, go do something else. Like, go get a real job. I'm like,
that just sounds so painful to do. Even the part of like, just the like, it shouldn't hurt that much. I feel like why would you do something if it hurts that bad when you, and I think this applies to like anything that you want to do, like working out where the results are very delayed. It's like, it shouldn't suck that bad every day. And if you go too hard in the beginning, you're just not going to stick with it. Right. So like,
yeah,
why not take those baby steps? And I think the fear is that like, oh, if I don't get this done quick, it's never going to happen. So I have to put 1,000% intensity in the beginning. And I don't know, that just never works for me.
No, I don't. It doesn't. I don't think it works for a lot of people. I think a small amount work if they have to be that extreme. But I mean, it's the same way. Like, I understand when people, I mean, and I've been a huge fan of Gary, but the hustle culture never really made sense to me anyway, just because of the burnout rate. And I'm like, there's so many other factors. I understand his messaging, but look, Gary doesn't even do that messaging anymore. There was a reason, because it's not sustainable. It's not sustainable. So it is what it is. It is what it is.
This has been great, Doc. Any other things that you want to call out about the study? I kind of ran through it and didn't give you a chance to.
No. I mean, the main thing is the reason we did the study, and we want to do it, year to year. We might do an AI study coming up too. But the reason is we just wanted to have a standard or a benchmark to really see this long term. And there are hundreds and thousands of no code tools coming out all the time. But like, the theme is like, people are making money. There are tons of ways to make money. Think about what you want to do to make money, and then just do that. Because I think there's a very narrative, like there's a small narrative of story, how people are thinking about how to make money with no code. And this is just the tip of that iceberg. There's so many other nuances and like things that we couldn't even go into. I mean, honestly, I think the biggest things that people aren't looking at, what's going to happen in 2023, especially with like AI and machine learning, it's very similar to how I think like the internet browsing. There's so much information. I think there's going to be so much like people being paralyzed and getting instant gratification. I think the way of curation and being a guided person that has expertise is going to be more and more important this year than ever before. And so I think there's a huge opportunity of niche expertise, and especially, I mean, this is something we didn't even cover in this, but I think with the rise of VCs are not putting out as much money this year because of the economy. People are getting cut from Microsoft and tons of these tech companies. This is the perfect time to be a bootstrapper and understand how to approach the market and just be helpful. Don't chase the money. Just be great at what you love to do, and the money will follow.
Is the now? Do you think that the fact that VCs are not putting out that much money, or going to be putting out that much money in the future, do you think that's a clear opportunity for the no code platforms to be marketing to, like, look, you don't need to get funding. You can bootstrap this yourself or with a team, right? Like,
Yeah.
there's another way.
I think if they want to go that pivot, it just depends on what they want to do. I think it's going to be up to the entrepreneur and the builders out there to do it, because I think depending on, I mean, listen, Bubble's VC funded now, right? They took in funding, so their messaging might be off. Maybe they have a clearer message, or their shareholders are like, no, you have to get this way to be profitable. So I think it's really going to depend on how they're going to approach it. I think as entrepreneurs, it's going to be us going to the people. In either, I see a huge opportunity. If I was an entrepreneur and I use no code tools, I would be trying to talk to every accelerator I know to be the voice of reason to teach their incoming classes how to use no code tools. And I would have a niche just going to accelerators, because now it benefits the accelerator. It benefits all of the students. I'm now a notable and signature name, and I build my brand. There's so many opportunities like this. But if I'm like trying to get closer to top of funnels, I'd go to accelerators, hands down.
Yeah, and like you said, I think there's just so many different. You almost get paralysis on how many different avenues there are. That's one. That's like the start, like kind of being a voice for the new startups going through accelerators. That, like, how much cheaper would that be than, or not cheaper, but like how much more could you get done? How much more could you learn about the problem that you're solving if you had the speed that you can with no code as opposed to hand coding it, right? Like,
yeah, it's not even close. It's not even close. And that's why I'm like, and if I was doing like if I was learning 3 tools to really, if I was going to go after accelerators, Bubble, Flutterflow, and ShareTribe, those would be my 3.
Tell me, because I know Bubble intimately. I teach Bubble. I play with Flutterflow. I haven't actually built anything useful on it. But Share Tribe, I have never used. I've heard it like maybe 3 or 4 times. Uh, I thought it was kind of like a Shopify type thing, but I might be wrong about that.
Yeah. That's interesting. I've never heard it like described it like that. I would just view it as any kind of marketplace that you're trying to create. That's what Share Tribe is for. So
Marketplaces.
extreme. I mean, you could probably do other things, but it's meant for marketplaces.
Gotcha.
And
Okay.
so any kind of marketplace you could do. Now, of course, some people like anything like Uber. I'm like, okay, just do Flutterflow, calm down. But if I'm doing any kind of, if you want to do an Upwork, if you want to do a Fiverr, you could do it with Share Tribe today out of the box with Share Tribe Go. It has limited features because Share Tribe Flex uses SDKs, software development kits, and you can do more coding and more, specialty things. But you can use Share Tribe Go, and I'm like 99% of all of the marketplaces you want to create can just be used on Go. And then because you're on the platform, you can just change it over to your Flex plan once you understand how to code it, or if you're going to work with a coding team. But the advantage is you can go to market, understand what you like and don't like, and then change it with Flex.
Got you. Okay,
Yeah.
and I'm thinking that you're saying Bubble, Flutterflow, Share Tribe, Bubble for any kind of like web application or desktop looking stuff, Flutterflow for mobile, Share Tribe for marketplaces, and that'll cover
Yeah.
like probably like 80 to 90% of what the accelerator ideas are, right?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, because you know how many people are like, oh, we want to be the Airbnb. Yeah, whatever. Okay, just use Share Tribe, right? If we want to do this and this, like, we can figure it out. Oh, we need to be native and all. Okay, just use Flutterflow. Oh, we want to do anything else, just use Bubble. Like,
Yeah.
it's that quick. Again, it's the learning curve. Like, okay, which ones? The easiest out of the three is Share Tribe. Bubble and Flutterflow are just fundamentally different. I would say if you can understand Bubble and spend more time, then the transferable skills going to Flutterflow will be like that.
I noticed that as I started playing with Flutterflow a little bit, it's like there's a lot of the terminology that they use, like containers, like all of those things are the parent-child elements. There's a pretty
Yeah.
similar, parallel between the
Yeah.
two, and was pretty easy for me to pick up what was happening. Again, I didn't build anything useful, but if I had a use case for it, it wouldn't take me that long, I think, to pick up Flutterflow just because of the base that I have with Bubble.
Exactly. It's the same way as like I feel like in like animation, if people understand like Blender and then they go to Unreal Engine 5, like if you can do anything in Blender, it's like you go to Unreal, it's like, oh man, this is so much easier. But I
Oh,
understand
man.
the concepts because it's over there. And again, like for like if it's really quick and dirty, it's this many hours, like I have to do it in a weekend, we might use another platform. But I find that every time you just bump up to these restrictions and then people are like, well, I should have done this from the beginning. I'm like, okay, well, yeah, you should have. Let's just go to Bubble. Just take yourself to Bubble then. But yeah, that's what I would do.
I love it, man. Doc, thank you so much, man.
Yeah, man.
I appreciate this again. You're an inspiration for us. I hope that I get to that point where I find that laser sharp target that you found, and I'm hoping it's just putting in the reps and listening
Absolutely.
for that time. So again,
Absolutely.
thanks so much, Doc. We'll talk soon.
Awesome, man. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, catch you later, buddy.
See ya.